You're listening to The Next Stop Is with Jane August, where I talk to the people making my favorite experiences in the city. It has been quite a bit since I recorded the podcast because I've been pretty burnt out with all my projects, and that's something that I think today's guest can relate to. Today, I'm joined by Claire Bird, Ava Campbell, and William Strom, 3 of the 5 artists that make up Ponycam, which is an award-winning Australia-based collective known for their experimental works that subvert well-known forms in non-traditional performance spaces and for inviting audiences into their work in unexpected ways. And you can witness that live right now off-Broadway at the Astor Place Theater, where they are performing their show Burnout Paradise, currently running into the summer. It is one of the most unhinged and exhilarating shows that I've ever seen, and it is the most fun you can have in a theater right now. It is an interesting mix of theater, performance art, community building, and so much more. They have toured it all around the world since its debut in 2023, with it being a hit at the Melbourne and Edinburgh Fringe Festivals. I saw it during its short run at St. Anne's Warehouse in 2024, and I've already seen it twice during its current off-Broadway engagement. And I'm so excited to have them here today, and I'm going to let them really tell you about it. Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
So to start, what's everyone's current burnout level?
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10?
Yeah.
I think I'm probably a 5 out of 10.
Past couple of days have been really good, so I'll give it a 4.
I think mine's probably also like 8, 8.5. But we're getting there. I think your show's so incredible, Burnout Paradise, literally running off-Broadway. Could you tell me a bit about the show and what it is?
Yes, so Burnout Paradise is a show where we have 4 performers running on treadmills, and they complete a series of escalating tasks under time pressure. And if those tasks aren't completed, we offer the audience refunds. Some of those tasks that we complete are cooking a 3-course meal, submitting a grant application, performing for the audience's viewing pleasure, as well as doing a complicated list of your everyday weekly to-do tasks.
How did you conceive this show?
And much like the way we navigate conversation, we've been working together for the last 6 years as a collective. We all studied theatre together, and then when we finished, we were like, this is pretty interesting and pretty special. And in Melbourne at the time, you know, I think there was a lineage of collectives working maybe more in the 80s and the 90s, and then not so much these days. And we're like, okay, I think we need to just keep working together and keep making things in this way. So we're always like very process focused in the way that we work. And I think sometimes this is an interesting question because we don't necessarily have like a database of ideas. We're pretty responsive to like influence or things that pop up or an opportunity or a community group. And so we just kind of like, we love doing Fringe. I think it's always a time for us to just kind of like get something out that feels really like authentically us, or like there's less pressure on it. It's just like put up a show. And so when we made this, it was coming off the back of a lot of like works that we'd been doing with a bunch of communities. Like we make works in car parks with young people and in like lots of random different places. But this was like, all right, we haven't got any money. We're putting on a Fringe show. We're all really tired. What do we want to do? And we jumped on a Zoom call. I think I was like, I'd just love to do a process where I can get fit at the same time. And then we're like, okay, we're going to do some treadmills. We're also reflecting on just like how much we'd been making, especially coming out of like lockdowns and things in Melbourne. We'd just been like churning and making as we usually do. We're working like 5 other jobs. And so I think all of the like things just tumbled together in a way where we were like, that's the starting point. And then we bought 4 treadmills and dumped them in a garage, and then started making this show.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Lots of people, I think in New York City, like art collectives are still not really as prominent as it used to be. Like what does it mean, and how do you all work together to like make a show, since you don't have like a single person leading the charge?
Yes. How do we do that?
Sometimes I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes I really don't know what happens in a process.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's I try to journal sometimes to try to track how it happens, because often it's very difficult to look back and figure out exactly what we actually did. I think part of that is in working collectively. Sometimes it's really difficult to kind of identify where an idea has begun, because maybe Ava says something that she barely even thinks about just in passing, but it sticks with me for some reason, and then I bring it up a day later, but I don't do anything with it, and then Claire hears it and goes, I'm going to make something from that, just like a 30-second little thing, and then all 5 of us have seen this thing, and did Claire make that? Did Ava make that? Did I make that? It's messy.
I actually think I might have an analogy to describe it succinctly, household. Back in my share housing days, I had a few houses where we all had our fixed roles, and I had one housemate who just always mowed the lawns. But then that one housemate moved out and we were like, oh, no one's mowing the lawn. But we adapted and someone eventually started mowing the lawns. And I think it's like a family system in that way, where we all have these roles that are somewhat unspoken. I previously didn't realise how much my housemate mowed the lawn until they were gone. And so throughout our processes, we all have different capacities. Sometimes people have to step away to tend to family commitments or other commitments, but we shift and we adapt. And I think we have our set roles that are both visible and invisible, but we adapt to the needs of the room in a very fluid way.
I think we also just we love tasks, which is probably very evident in this show, is we love to find frameworks in which we can all meet each other. And so usually that's task-based, or we'll set ourselves an assignment, or it'll be when we were making this show, we were working basically at the Queen Victoria Markets, which is this huge markets that's on from Thursday to Sunday every week. And we'd open up the roller door and there are the markets. And we'd be like, all right, we're trying to find engaging things to do on the treadmill. We're just throwing shit at a wall, take $20, go to the markets, find something, bring it back, create a performance, show us. We'll all sit there and watch it like this, okay, what's going on? Are we going to like this? And then we're always kind of hunting for, I guess, a gemstone, even if it's rough or if it's kind of non-present. There's usually something in something that we'll present to each other that's all right, put it in the bag. That might come back later, or that might not, or things just tend to ebb and flow throughout a process like that.
What did the early iterations of the show look like? How did it start to before we got here?
We made the show in 3.5 or 4 weeks or so. And a lot of that time was kind of this stuff that Claire is talking about, was just bringing something in and trying it out on a treadmill and watching each other do it and figuring out what's interesting to do here, what's not interesting to do here, seeing what sort of conceptual frames married well with the fact of the 4 treadmills in the space.
And then as it started to grow, the thematics of our lives and us kind of knowing that burnout was a part of the work and talking about burnout, but realizing that maybe burnout is this really individual thing that we all don't have really a shared understanding of. And as much as we can talk about it together, everyone's experience of it was so different. And so these categories came about: the survival treadmill, the performance treadmill, the admin treadmill, and the leisure treadmill as camps of our lives to kind of unpack or make external that thing that we're all going through, that thing that we have amongst us. And then once we had those frameworks, thinking about the survival treadmill, we're okay, well, what is just surviving? And it's it's just being able to feed yourself. And then we're all right, well, can we cook on stage? How do we figure out how much training we need to work a hot plate and have a boiling pan of water, and then navigating those kind of things once we make these choices.
What's the audience's experience for this show? If for people who don't know, what role does the audience play?
We start the show with 6 or 7 minutes where we are basically just explaining what's going to happen, what the stakes are, what the consequences will be, and how people can behave in the space, which we almost do for every one of our shows, I think, because it's important to us that even if we're not running a sort of traditionally theatrical space in the sense that audience members come and they sit in the dark and they wait for the thing to happen in front of them and then they leave, it's important to us that people are still comfortable and feel welcome and feel like they can be participating in whatever it is that happens in the show. So we explain to people at the start of the show that it is a participatory show, but only if you want to jump in. There's no requirement for people to get involved. And basically throughout the show, there's just various tasks that we kind of need help with. So it's less about, I need someone to come up here and I'm going to like play a trick on them or like make a joke about their engagement, and more just, hey, I actually genuinely just need someone's help right now. Can someone help me grab that razor so that I can get my head shaved or whatever it is? And what I've found is that people are more willing, I think, to engage in that sort of relationship where they recognize that it's just a task that needs completion. And so I understand those parameters and I can jump in and feel comfortable and safe and play within them.
Was the audience always a part of the show from the beginning?
They were always a part of it. If you're doing a show on treadmills and aspiring to complete tasks, you are on an island, and even little things like you can't reach for everything all the time, so you literally need the help of people. I think all of our work tries to be non-traditional in the way that it invites audiences to experience theatre. So it's a value of ours to definitely have immersive and participatory work forefronted in a lot of the shows that we do.
How can someone be a good audience member for this show?
I don't know if there is. Yeah, I don't think there's one right way to be in this show. Most things are pretty allowed, and short of just being responsive to us as humans as much as we are responsive to our audience as humans, and we can meet in the interactions that we are having, both like from the seat or from the stage. I think that's kind of where the beauty of this show lives, in that reality that like we're having an exchange, you know. How can we do this together in really playful and fun ways? Sometimes just like yelling at us from your seat is enough to be like, this task, you're doing the grant wrong. You know, sometimes people have called me up for having spelling mistakes in the grant in the first 10 minutes of the show, and I'm like, yeah, okay, this is probably useful.
And in talking to the audience after the show, and the few times that I've been able to watch the show myself, that's also very much part of the work, is watching how the community of audience that night chooses to engage with the performance and with the performers. Is there like someone coming up and treating me like I'm just a piece of meat that needs to have sunscreen thrown on them, and like how does the rest of the audience receive that, and does that make someone else come up later who is then very gentle and very caring and kind of just didn't even come to like help me with a specific task, but just to say, hey, are you okay? Is there something I can do to support you in this moment? Do you want just someone to breathe with? Or so the like ebb and flow of the way that different communities engage with the work is sometimes a real joy to watch and experience.
So every show you're completing an arts grant application. Is it a different grant each show?
It's a different grant most seasons that we do. And if we find a grant that we really like, if we find a very dramaturgically sound grant, then we will probably, which just sounds so strange coming out of my mouth, we might switch it up. For this season, we've been applying to the same grant but doing different ideas every night.
Has anything actually come from the grant applications? Has any of them been successful?
Not successful in a monetary sense. Usually the grant value is anywhere from the $1,000 to $5,000 mark that we're applying for. So all grants have not been successful. However, we have had success in engaging with the grant body, the administrators who are behind the grant. So we will often send them the grant every night and then get a really beautiful phone call to the number that we've supplied on the grant, and they will be like, hey, would you guys like a hand with submitting this grant application? I can see you've got an idea, that you're working really hard on it. And then we explain the premise of the show and give them free tickets, and they really rally behind us because it's sort of like a shared platform, as well as also representing all the work that arts administrators do to support art in their communities.
It's actually so true. Like, I never really thought of, like, if there's people who don't understand what art administration is, who I guess are learning now through the show.
Yeah, it's a huge part of what we do. And it's a lot of, I guess for us, the administration treadmill with the computer strapped to the treadmill was a world to represent where most of the arts work goes, because that is invisible labour that doesn't get celebrated when you have a beautiful performance on stage.
Which you're each doing a performance on the treadmills as well. Yeah. How did you select which ones you're doing?
How did you pick yours?
I can't remember. I feel like some of them came from those like random tasks that we like would send out and come back and do little performances. Yes. And yeah, I feel like some of them were found maybe before the framework of performance, and then some were found after we decided, like, I'd say like performance as the treadmill doesn't necessarily fit with like the surviving and the leisure and the admin of life, and yet like it is so specific to us. And it's like, yes, the show is the performance, but also like performing is what we do. And the theme of that started to become around maybe more like our history of performing, and so it started going into that like childhood territory. I do 3 of my old competition dances from when I was a kid. William sings some songs that his grandma would make him sing at Christmas time. Hugo does like Shakespeare monologue. Dom does a very strange performance based around like his
cereal
swimming,
right?
Yeah,
cereal,
like
yes.
that one's a bit left of field. But
so Dominic's, I don't think this is going to be as amusing to anyone else in the world as it is to me, but Dominic's performance was originally him going backwards on the treadmill with one of those kind of long grabber things that you might use to like pick up litter or something. He had a small glass cup and a container of nuts that he would spill onto the floor, and over the course of 10 minutes, very slowly just pick the nuts up, put them into the jar, into the cup, and then try to pick the cup up and put it into his hand, and inevitably drop the cup and have to start all over again. I think that was the first performance that we had.
We called it Nutman.
We called it Nutman, and we still do call it Nutman, even though it no longer uses nuts. And we played a sort of Russian folk song over it. Anyway, very different world. But when we were looking at the other 3 performances, which are Claire doing dances from their childhood, Hugo performing a monologue from the first theatre show he ever saw, and myself playing the keyboard and singing some songs from when I was younger, we were like, okay, well, there's a through line here that maybe we should try to stick to, which is being a kid and like performance that comes from childhood and like first encounters with the arts. The action is still very much the same, but we changed it from nuts to cereal going into a bowl as his preparation for a swimming practice.
And there was a practicality there as well because nuts is obviously an allergy concern, so we had to change it.
Back when we first performed the show at the Melbourne Fringe Festival, some of the staff came to us one day and were like, "The CEO is coming tonight. He has a deadly nut allergy. You must change the work. It cannot contain nuts." So then it became Nutri-Grain, which is a fairly Australian cereal.
We trialed a lot of cereals.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's really probably got us into the cereal business.
And I
Burnout
think
Paradise Wheaties.
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't that be something?
And throughout the show, we're always interested in, like, what affect does the treadmill have on the task that we're doing? And when we, especially in performance, I think, to be like, what will bringing a piano, can I bring a piano out and play it on the treadmill and, like, sing at the same time? Like, can I even do that? Can I do these dance performances that were made on solid ground whilst, like, rolling around on a treadmill going at, half speed? So, like, finding the things where what we're doing is affected by the treadmill itself was always, like, an interest and a through line of ours as well.
That's a good point, because sometimes you might have the best idea, but on a treadmill, it's just not interesting. And so it has to fit the aesthetic of a treadmill and the interest of the risk in a task.
Yeah, like eating a whole iceberg lettuce, which is really, really hard on a treadmill. And hard to the point where it's actually not interesting because you're just suffering. Like, there's the ones that go the complete other direction as well that did not make the cut.
What kind of things have you learned that you're able to do, like skills you found out, especially skills you found out you can do on a treadmill during this?
Eating on the treadmill is really interesting because you're sort of running and you see some food and you're like, yeah, I can eat that. But you almost forget that you have to breathe, and that in everyday life when you eat, when you're not, at the height of your cardio, you are taking breaths between the time you chew. And so I think a lot of us have had the experience of having to scull something or eat something and not being able to breathe. But now everyone can kind of, like, take that treadmill lower and do tactfully breathe while eating on a treadmill.
Most things with the right frame around them we can find a way that they're interesting. I think generally we lean towards things that are, as Claire was saying, are kind of affected by the fact of being on a treadmill. And then also things that leave a mark on the body in some way. Stuff like apply lipstick, for example. That performer gets the lipstick applied in the 6th minute of the show, and then 70 minutes later you can see the consequences of the show on their body, and the lipstick is one of them, and that transformation is really interesting. One of the big learnings for me from this show has been less about what I can or we can do on a treadmill, and more about the level of vulnerability that audience members are willing to offer. We've had audience members in various shows, like, take risks, not necessarily physical risks that could result in bodily harm, but sort of like putting themselves out there in front of an entire audience and us, a bunch of strangers, and just, like, doing something vulnerably because they perceive something needs to be done, or someone needs help with something, or a risk needs to be taken. So they just kind of do it. And that's been quite moving to me, I think, in seeing how universal that is almost. People are just willing to, like, put themselves on the line sometimes. It means a lot to me.
Ava, during the shows, you aren't running. You play a very different role. Like, how did that come to be?
For context, I usually host the show, and then I understudy for running when it's needed as injuries and people's needs dictate. So that came about during the rehearsal process. I was I had other life things that I was completing, and I couldn't attend much of the rehearsal process. And then I came in like 3 or 2 days before, and I was like, guys, how can I impact in this show? And sort of earlier on, we were like, look, we'll host because we're on islands on treadmills, and we'll need someone like running about the space and curating the space in a different way.
Ava was doing a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Ava came in, was like, I can offer you this amount of time for the rehearsal process, which, you know, in a collaborative environment, it's just like, okay, we'll take it, you know. Just because you can't be available for all of it doesn't mean we're not going to like make a role for you and force you to host the entire show.
Mm-hmm.
And initially we had Ava with one of those strap-on laptops as well. And then part of the show was Ava being like, all right, here I am doing my business, hosting. We're like, how can we get Ava to be doing as many tasks as everyone else in the space? This is kind of, you know, emulating our life and all the rest of it. And so Ava's completing the master's like essays on the laptop whilst hosting, whilst handing out Gatorade, whilst tending to us, whilst cleaning up spills, whilst gaffering down things, whilst like just like running around.
Which was very real. The night the show opened in its first iteration, I had 2 weeks before my thesis was due. And so I was legitimately working on my thesis while hosting. I was just like fixing my references and working to a real life deadline on that.
So it felt very true to the immediacy of and to the feeling of everything that we're kind of, you know, unpacking in the show.
Do you think that you have different difficulties during the show as the only one who isn't on an island?
Yeah, definitely. I think the host really is a bridge between the audience and the performers, and it lives in a world of service. We also coyly sell merchandise and serve the audience Gatorade, sort of tongue-in-cheek. So it is sort of a symbol of service role and service industry. In relation to burnout, audience members will either see that role of service as a role of service, and some will see it more as a metaphor. And so in terms of the way that the audience engage with you, they will either, there's sort of a spectrum of having a practical function to being seen more as a like traditional performer in that sense. So there's a nuance there in how that role serves as a function of the show.
Do you each have a favorite treadmill during the show? Is there like a favorite part?
They each have their own. They each have their own value for me. We cycle through the treadmills every 12 minutes. We change treadmill, and I end on the performance treadmill, which is facing away from the audience, which means when we're on the performance treadmill, we're going backwards so that we can face the audience. And after 36 minutes of running forwards as hard as I can, it's a nice change of pace to go backwards instead. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, similarly, the final treadmill for me is usually survival. And at that point, I roll the pasta noodles, I get everything in the pot. The pasta sauce is usually just like simmering away at that point. And it's the only part in the show where I can actually just run a little bit without having to like twist my body and turn over here and yell at the audience and be like doing 100 million other things. And like, I've never been a runner. Like, I had never run before this show. And I do get it now. I get why it's enjoyable, but and some nights that there's like, you know, probably a 2-minute window there where I can like actually just clock it up real hard on the distance.
Have the audiences been different from like different places that you've gone, like the vibes and how they interact with the show?
I think they are different. I think the way different communities and different cultures receive help and ask for help and enact community care is really different. I think speaking to our own culture in Australia, we've found that sometimes the audiences are a little bit more slower to warm up, but across all places that we've visited, I've found that generally by Act 2 or Act 3, everyone's in and there's a full swing of participation. But yeah, just that initial impulse control, I think, is a difference between different countries we've been to.
It's funny getting worded up by usually like the head of a festival or someone who's hosting us in the venue, and they'll be like, oh, I remember in Ireland we were performing in Cork, and they were just like, you won't get them out of their seat. That's just not that kind of audience. And we're like, okay, we'll give it a go. And they were definitely more ready to stay in their seat. But that, and in a way, like I think maybe like their humor was probably closer to an Australian audience's humor, and so those kind of like familial points where the audience would laugh would like come more frequently, and they're very raucous, but they were just a little bit more like, prove it. Make me get out of my seat. And you're like, all right, come on. But we did, by the end of it, they're just like the same. Everyone's kind of getting up and doing it. And
I think
that's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. There's such a beauty. I think if you have someone sitting somewhere and they're reaching for something that is out of their reach and their hand is straining and they're pulling and pulling, I think it's only natural that someone eventually will get up and push that object into that person's hand while they're reaching. And yeah, I just feel like the time it takes for someone to push that object into their hand will vary across different cultures, but it's just beautiful that eventually I feel like someone will extend a helping hand.
It's a really interesting study of how long do people have to acknowledge someone else's struggle to help.
Absolutely. And also independence. Some cultures are like, well, it's good to let that person figure out how to reach that thing for themselves.
How has New York been for it? Are you usually ready to help, or do we have to warm them up?
Usually pretty ready to help.
Oh, New York's fun. New York's really fun. The audiences are really beautiful and exuberant.
Yeah. Feels like maybe much in the same way that we intonate in the way we speak. It feels like Australians probably have this we speak very much from the back of our mouths, and it's a bit lazier and it's a bit more laid back, and not to say that we're lazy in any way, but the kind of speech patterning I think maybe even reflects a way of being, in that we're like, here we are, what are you gonna do? Whereas there is a forwardness, I think, about an American way of speaking, and that is in that forwardness, or in the firmness of speech. There's also this readiness to get up, or this readiness to kind of do something. And it's certainly not everyone. Everyone is so unique and individual in the way, but across the board, it does feel like there's more you've asked me to do something, I'm ready to go. Whereas you ask an Australian audience to do something, they're like, yeah, all right, okay, let's go, get up and help.
And this is the longest sit down you've had of the show, right?
Yep.
Yes.
How has it changed throughout this run? Are you having people coming back a lot? Is that affecting the vibe?
We've had more return viewers than ever by a huge margin, I think.
Why do you think people keep coming back for it?
I feel that there's something around the culture of personality and of work in this city specifically, and maybe in the country more broadly, but I feel like there's an energy around Broadway and off-Broadway shows where people invest in them with their personality a bit more than maybe in some other places. And so revisiting the same show becomes a way to come back in contact with that space and those performers, and also yourself, and see how have you changed, and who are you now in relation to this kind of semi-fixed point.
I also think we have a lot of return audience members because they come and experience a feeling, and then they want to share that feeling with their loved ones. We'll have people come and they'll be like, I'm coming back and I'm bringing my best friends, and I'm coming back and I'm bringing my family members. And sure, I've met audience members, and then I've met their brothers, and then their their other siblings, and it's a really beautiful experience. Or their students, if they're teachers, they'll bring a whole class after seeing the show. Simply put, it's resonating with something in their lives and they want to share that feeling, and this theatre show is a way that they can communicate with other people.
The sharing is a gorgeous thing. It's really beautiful. It's like having someone come back and be like speaking to someone in the foyer afterwards, and they're like, hey, I spoke to you like 2 weeks ago. I'm back and this is my brother. Yeah. And it's like, that's just, especially for someone who is like a stranger to the city, it's kind of really lovely to just have people be like, here I am, and here's some people that I care about, and here you are.
Totally. And I think we've also had other people, slightly a little bit different, but come up to us and offer their services of the industry that they work in. So they'll be like, hey, I loved seeing you guys do what you do up here and work so hard. I want to offer you something, like Pilates instructor, tour guides, nutritionists, physios. They will come up and say, hey, do you guys need help? Because I see what you're doing here, how you're activating community and how you're working really hard, and I want to give into this experience in some way. So I think that's also a component of whatever we're talking about here.
There's also a show that I think really intergenerationally hits well. Like, I think, for working people and young people, it's like the feeling is so real and tangible, and there's like the community, the thing that you were saying at the beginning, like there's this search for the community, and even if we can make it for 90 minutes in a night, there's an energy in that, or there's like a collective coming together. I think, like, but we have kids coming who for the first time experience a show where they don't have to sit in their seats and be quiet. They can like feel very autonomous in the way that they can go about things, which sometimes starts super rowdy, but by the end of the show they're like as with us and as connected as like any other audience member, which is wildly interesting. And even older folks come to the show and everyone just seems to be in this kind of like boat, especially here, of like understanding and unpicking, and you can always see a different version of what's happening, or you can always kind of tune in to different modes. So when people are like, I'm coming back and I'm bringing my dad, and my dad hates theatre, but like I think this one might be the one, like it's accessible in that way because dad might love sport. This is kind of like a sporting match for theatre. Mum might love the musicals. There's some music in it, but it might be a little more challenging, but there's an energy in the show, I think.
And it is just that thing of a lot of people say they've never had a theatre experience like this, and so I think that's an exciting point for people to come again because they're trying to understand it as well.
Did you expect that this show, which on the surface seems like a very stressful experience for all of you, would bring so much joy to people?
I don't know if we ever expect our shows to
be anything.
To be anything.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we are, when we make, we are so process focused, and specific about the way that we do our process and rigorous, and draw from like clown inspiration and like all of our training in theatre and the sort of lineage of history of different groups and different performances and things that we've seen, like all influencing us all the time. And so we kind of like tumble through this process. Really, it's those first couple of nights where we meet our audience in that way that we start to discover what the show is saying and what the show's about and how the show is talking to people. When we first started the show, I could have said that it feels like it's about community, or it feels like it's about bringing people together to create a community, or in that way, which is maybe what the beautiful thing about artists being able to tour or continue their work, which actually, like, a lot of art just has a 1 week season, or 3-day season, really. Like, independent artists are making these shows that take so much effort and labor and time and grant applications and all the rest of it for a 3-day season that maybe never gets seen again and is seen by like a tiny pocket of people. And so, yeah, we feel very privileged that we've been able to like learn from the work and discover what it's about through the process of doing, which I think is how we approach most of our shows as well.
How are you like building community personally? Because it must be hard being literally across the globe from home. Like how are you acclimating to New York and making your world here?
I had a really tough first month. That was partially to do with just kind of working nonstop, bumping the show in, and then trying to make it live in the space. But then also largely to do with being in a city that's halfway across the world from where I live, and not knowing anyone and not knowing the place either. Slowly, as I became more familiar with the geography, like starting to learn some of the places that I like to go, but more than that, the people. I think I just found that almost every New Yorker that I have a lengthened interaction with has just been incredibly generous, like to a really moving degree for someone who feels so kind of otherwise disconnected or like ungrounded. You know, I had as I was leaving the theater one night, I happened to pass some audience members who had just come out of the show and were talking about the show, and then I got talking to them and they invited me to the dinner that they were going to, and just like so kind, so warm, so generous. And that sort of interaction, I'm shocked at how like this city is very sort of dehumanizing in a lot of ways, and the people that live in it are so human and so empathetic and so like sort of in their own world, but when you meet them, so caring.
We were previously in New York over a year ago, and so we had some existing connections from that time here, but definitely the show, through the audience members and through also the other people in our backstage crew, we've been able to really lean on people's generosity, which we're really grateful for. And people, they have an energy to be like, hey, this is the New York I see. I want to share that with you. Let me take you here. Or, you know, and we've just really been very fortunate to experience that energy.
So after this very successful run, what do you think's next for this show? Is it going to go further? Is there other work you're longing to make after spending so much time with this?
Well, this show has we're off to Germany in May, and then we're also off to Ireland. So like I assume it will have some sort of touring life beyond this. And then we're working on a new dance work in September for the Fall for Dance Festival. So that's next on our horizon. So we'll be back in New York, hopefully having some fun with a bunch of beautiful people.
We're pretty interested in if like the show can cross language barriers as well as a touring thing. So Germany will be our first touch point for that, which feels like a moderate step because we'll be attempting to like do a whole, like for a show that is largely us just talking, improvising the whole time. Yes, it'll be like an interesting like half step maybe where the audience does probably speak a lot of English, but we want to make it accommodating to the place that we're in. So there's going to be maybe some learning around that. But we're always pretty hungry for the next work. We're always pretty hungry to make a new piece and balance what it means to like tour something that has had quite a lot of success, know that can sustain us as an arts practice, which is, you know, kind of beyond incredible. But also like, keep making together, keep making new work. We did a Chekhov play last year as our sort of like new piece of the year. We did the Cherry Orchard in a very strange and like improvisational kind of way. But yeah, we'll just keep finding what the new thing is, I think.
Is there anything else that people listening should know about the show before we wrap up?
When we first made the show, it was the five of us, and we were doing pretty much everything. And we're used to that, and we accepted that. In this season, that is absolutely not the case. The show could not exist as it is without the work of so many other people. And we kind of get the privilege of the five of us, or the seven of us with our two swings, Carl and Chan, get the privilege of being able to like be on stage, be kind of witnessed in our work, receive applause, have conversations with audience members afterwards, be able to do this sort of thing, get to like talk about the show and celebrate the show and celebrate the work. And there are so many people, the front of house staff, marketing team, producing team, backstage hands, technical team, all of those people who the show could not exist without. Most of their work, if nothing goes wrong, is kind of invisible. After the show, we go out and we get to talk to the audience members and stage hands coming onto the stage and sweeping up and mopping up the huge mess that we make every show. Spaghetti everywhere, wax strips stuck to the floor, cereal half melted with milk. So to say that the work as it is in this city could not exist without the sort of unseen labor of dozens of people, and huge thank you to all of those people for their work.
I've been wrapping up with the question of what's been bringing you joy lately?
For me, what's been bringing me joy is cabbage. I'm half Polish, and so I really love cabbage. I feel like it's the food of my people, and I've been cooking a lot with cabbage. I recently made like kind of like hispy cabbage, but like green with a green sauce sort of vibe. And anyway, cabbage.
I grew up in a very sunny, warm place on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and I just don't think I can live without sunshine. It makes me incredibly sad without getting sun on my entire body. And so the sun has been making me very happy, and I've had some visitors come. This is probably the longest time that we've been able to settle in on any tour. And so people jumping in and being like, I'm going to come visit you and my family and like loved ones, and that's also been really, really nice. So I'm just trying to squeeze every moment out of both sunshine and everyone who's come to visit me.
I have a deep and hearty passion for ice cream. You've got a lot of ice cream in this city.
That is true.
Yeah. What's bringing you joy at the moment?
What's bringing me joy is I was like sick like last week, and I'm not, which is like really thrilling when you like wake up and you're like, wow, I feel like I'm a person again.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing traveling next week, so that's something I'm looking forward to, and like catching up on like the podcast and other projects. It's fun when you're like really like I'm drowning and stuff, and then finding your way out and being like, wow, the sunshine's there.
Absolutely.
Like, so that's what's bringing me joy lately.
Beautiful.
So that's it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having us. It's been really fun to dive into the show and answer questions we don't really ask ourselves that often.
Burnout Paradise is currently running at the Astor Place Theater, and you can learn more at burnoutparadise.com and follow the show at Burnout Paradise NYC, and you can follow Ponycam at Ponycam Collective. This has been The Next Stop Is with Jane August. You can follow me, Jane, at Jane August on Instagram and TikTok. The Next Stop Is recorded at Brick House in downtown Brooklyn. It premieres on Brooklyn Free Speech Radio. You can listen to other episodes in the same place you're listening to this one.